Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Mark Steven Porro, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And we want to talk about some of the amazing things you've done in your life, and also the fact that you're sitting in the south of France. How cool is that?
Yeah. So at the end of the story is pretty good. The beginning, we'll see.
Yeah, but great to have you, buddy. So where were you born?
I was born in Ridgewood, New Jersey, which is the farthest. It's in the farthest northeast county of New Jersey, a suburb of New York.
There you go.
About 20 minutes away, depending on traffic, or 20 hours. So I have both parents worked full time. My father was a chemist for Sandoz Pharmaceutical for most of his career. And my mom was a proofreader for the Bergen Record, which at the time was the largest newspaper in New Jersey.
There you go.
And they had 6 kids. And a funny story about that. So both of my parents are right-handed. The first 5 children were left-handed, and we all went to parochial school. And normally the nuns would try to convert you because being left-handed was a sign of the devil, but they didn't do it to any of us. And then my youngest sister, who may be the most creative of the family, is right-handed. So people kept asking, where do all these lefties come from? And I said, well, our mailman was a lefty.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up, born and raised, or as Richard Lewis says, born in Loward in New Jersey.
Right.
But it was a great, Ridgewood is a really cool little village. The village, it's 25,000 people, but it's still 20. It won't grow. They really seem to have capped that, and so it's been that size. And what was really cool is they didn't let any fast food restaurants come into the village. It was pretty upscale. We were middle class, but there's a lot of very wealthy people in the town also, because it is a suburb of Manhattan. And so that was cool. But all like Burger King and McDonald's were all surrounding our village, but they weren't allowed inside. So we could get to it if we needed.
I gotcha.
So I've got 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and 1 younger sister. And then I went to Ohio State to study. Eventually, I studied industrial design.
Okay.
So I had a real love of math and science, I guess, from my dad, and also the arts from my mom. And so industrial design mixed those perfectly. And I really lucked out because I originally went to Ohio State for medicine. And they had one of the best design programs in the country. So when I switched to that, it really was a stroke of luck for me. So that was cool.
Gotcha.
But early in life, we were all treated to the arts and turned on to all the arts from my mom. And all of us got into the ballet as kids. So we all performed in the ballet, and my mother tried to get us into modeling and all kinds of stuff. So I kind of put that aside. And then once I started designing, I got the acting bug again. And so then in '84, I moved out to Hollywood to become an actor.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. I wanted to be a good actor. So I started studying from day one. And my goal was to get on Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
And 2 years after I landed in LA, I got on Hill Street Blues. Actually, less than 2 years. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was very cool, very lucky. Again, it was a good show, but I was pretty good at the time. And once you get on a show like that, you've got a little bit of, I guess, status. And so that helped. And but then I didn't work again for like 7 months, which is
Wow.
typical.
Yeah.
Then you do another job, and you go, "Oh, I got this thing. This is Hollywood, no big deal." And then you wait another number of months sometimes. So it's a rough business.
Yeah.
But I got into writing and stuff there too, and I always kept designing. And I started a bunch of companies. I called them nonprofit companies, though none were intended to be.
They were actually for profit, but they ended up being nonprofit.
Yeah. I was very good at that.
So growing up in New Jersey,
Yeah.
what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I guess the freedom to do what we wanted to do. Our parents were really very cool. They led more by example.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot of scolding or anything like that. The first five of us all went to Catholic school for a while. I got out after third grade.
Yeah.
They nurtured our creative side. We learned how to be good to other people and support each other. And it was just a really cool place. And the education system in Ridgewood was very good. And they had a big town pool, which was more like a little small lake, and just really good. And what's very cool now is once I left, I never moved back home until the subject of the book came up. And as I've been promoting this book, I've been getting in touch with a lot of these people I've been in touch with for over 50 years. And it's just so cool. They knew things about my family that I didn't know they knew. They knew a lot of my older siblings and things like that. So that is amazing, I think. So that was definitely a reflection of my my upbringing in that little village, and how they're all coming back into my life in a really good way. So that's
awesome.
That
so growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Outside of my family, I mean, family definitely. But I got to tell you, my best teacher in high school was my shop teacher.
Okay, why?
Mr. Thomas was not just a shop teacher. He was more like what's the book? Shopcraft is Soulcraft to Shopcraft, or something like that, where you work with your hands, and it gives you a whole different perspective in life and stuff like that. But he was also kind of a philosopher, and I loved making and designing furniture and carving and creating things like that. And he nurtured that. And then eventually he hired me to do some things for him. And then I worked for him in summers during college, doing various things. So we were, it's almost like the Tuesdays with Morrie thing.
Yeah.
This particular teacher was really influential. And I've lost touch with him, which is sad. So it's similar to what happened with Tuesdays with Morrie, and I hope he's still around, because I'd love to get back in touch with him.
That's cool. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Yeah, woodshop.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
fine.
I loved math and science. What's funny now, now I'm I guess an award-winning published author. I cannot remember a book I read in high school.
Yeah.
And we could get away with it, I guess. English class was okay, but I didn't care for it. I love to create funny stories.
Yeah.
So I didn't study, let's say, the craft of writing or creative writing, but I did love creating, because I always wrote funny songs and created funny characters and stuff like that. So I guess it's somewhat unusual road to get to where I am now. But I guess that all kind of came out of again, growing up in a very creative, in a funny household. Both of my parents were very funny, and all my siblings are too. So sense of humor was also a big part of our life.
That's good. So when you decide to go to college, and I think you already answered this, but when you decide to go to college, why do you pick Ohio State?
Well, I visited two colleges, Harvard and Ohio State.
Wow.
And I'll leave it there. But apparently one of us is very picky about your grades and your SATs and stuff. And so
One of
Ohio
them.
State was not easy to get into either. But I visited Ohio State when I think I was in eighth grade,
Yeah.
eighth or ninth grade. My sister was studying there. And it just made a big impact on me.
Yeah.
And it ended up where 3 of the 6 kids went to Ohio State.
Wow.
And again, I went there originally for medicine. I knew they had a good medical school, but then when I switched to industrial design by, I guess, absolute luck, they ended up having one of the best schools in the country. So that worked out great for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So
yeah, I've got angels looking over my shoulder, I think, all the time.
Yeah, I got you. So you graduate from Ohio State. You end up going to Hollywood, and you end up getting on with Hill Street Blues, and you have a career in acting. Then you end up starting up like these various businesses that were supposed to be for profit but weren't so much, and it was kind of a challenge. Talk about the sort of the flashpoint in your life that caused you to write a book.
Well, when you're in Hollywood, you've got to supplement, the downtime with something. So I did a lot of design for a lot of big people in Hollywood. So that kind of kept me in the loop.
What were you designing?
But then I also used to, pardon me?
What were you designing?
Well, I was a graphic design and a corporate identity, I guess, specialist. So
Gotcha.
I designed the national logo for the Casting Society of America. That's how I met a lot of the casting people who are basically the gateway to getting work in Hollywood. So one of the casting people had a boyfriend who was the designer. So she knew design, and she saw my letterhead because I was learned to market very quickly. So I was sending letters to everybody saying, hey, I'm here, I'm doing plays, I was on Hill Street Blues, let's get going. And she called me up, she goes, I got good news and bad news. This is not about acting, but I know good design and I really like your letterhead. Would you be interested in this opportunity? And I jumped on that, and it was great because I met all the bigwigs in Hollywood, and that's eventually how I got the Hill Street Blues. I had that opportunity through somebody who was in that initial meeting. So again, in Hollywood, you start writing. I did stand up for a while, so I was writing jokes, and in improv, you're writing funny characters and their backgrounds and things like that. And then you started writing screenplays and scenes for acting class and things like that. So I got into that kind of writing. Never thought about writing a book until this incident happened with my mom. Yeah. And I always liked recording family history. Pardon me?
Talk about that for a second. What happened with your mom?
All right. So at the time I was in Hollywood, and I was in my mid 50s and living the carefree bachelor life. I was never married, had no kids, and no solid relationship with anybody. And I got a call in 2011, 9 days after my mom's 89th birthday. And my brother said that she just shut down. And he put her to bed and called the doctor, and the doctor cut off all meds and food and said, she's going, let her go, basically let her die, and call hospice. So when I hear that, I kind of freaked out because 14 years earlier, my dad was not doing well with heart disease, and he was on his last legs, and we called hospice, and 2 days later he died. So we all flew in, and my mom was living in the same house that we grew up in. And so we get there, and I called it a semi-comatose state. She rarely opened her eyes, didn't speak at all, and she did respond to touch, which was nice, but she was in her bed. We were on death watch. We had a Catholic priest come in and deliver the last rites. My sister and I went out and picked an earth-friendly coffin. The funeral arrangements were all handled by my brother, I guess, ahead of time. And that was it. But while hospice was there, my sister and I hung out with them because we wanted to be involved with my mom's care as much as possible for as long as she was going to be with us. So we were really good students. So we learned how to change the diapers of a helpless patient, change the bedding with, again, a helpless patient in the bed, which is not so easy. Tending to any medical needs. She had some bed sores at the time and stuff like that. and sponge bathing and knowing how to deal with a frail older person, moving them around and stuff like that. So we didn't cause any harm. And so that was pretty much a life changer. And then the directive from hospice was no food, no medication, no nothing. And a little moisture on her lips for comfort, and that was about it. And one of the hospice nurses came in after probably 3 weeks. And then we had rotating. We had a lot of different nurses come in, and a lot of them like to prescribe their own medicine. So this one nurse came in and we showed her the directive: no food, no medication, stays in bed, let her go. And she walked right into my mom's room and leaned in and said, "Mrs. Porro, are you hungry?" And my mother's eyes shot open for the first time in weeks, like a dinner bell rang. And then this nurse accused us of starving our mother to death, which I guess maybe happens with some families. It certainly wasn't the case with ours. And so we told her to go call her supervisor because she broke the rules. And her supervisor told her to leave. She said, "We're not supposed to introduce any food to this person." So she left. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, are we in fact starving our mother to death? Could hospice have been wrong? And the doctor certainly, she never came to visit. She just said over the phone, boom, cut out everything. So I went in and I asked my mother, she was hungry. And she said, "What do you got?" And it's the first words in weeks. And I said, "Anything you want. You're 89, you're awake." And she said, "Well, how about some pumpkin pie?" And at this point, it's March. So this whole thing started like the first week of February. Now we're into March, and she wants pumpkin pie. Well, it's not really pumpkin pie season.
Right.
But I had my brother was in the living room who lived locally, and I asked him if he wanted to go out and try to find some pumpkin pie. And by some small miracle, he came back with 2 pumpkin pies within about a half hour.
Wow.
And so her first food was a spoonful of pumpkin pie, which she spit out, which is, and I said, well, that didn't go so well. But I think that, she hadn't had food for several weeks. So the second bite did go well, and she downed half the pie. And she was back. She was sharp. She knew who everybody was.
Wow.
And the next day she downed the other half. And the next day she, I think, downed a full pie. And then we moved on to not the best medicine, but it was, it's all she wanted. We said, we're not going to, whatever you get. She wanted sherbet and only sherbet. So she ate about 8 bowls of sherbet a day. I think there was a glut in the market in New Jersey for a few weeks because we had to go to the market so many times looking for sherbet. And then she moved on to sugary oatmeal. But that's all she wanted, and she was doing great. So we said, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
So that was
crazy.
It was crazy. And then hospice stayed on for, I think they're contractually obligated to stay on for 6 months, at least in Jersey. So they were going to be there for a few more months. So everybody else started going away because, mom was back. And I hung on for a couple more, maybe a couple more months. Because we had people that were living in the house that were kind of managing the household duties and stuff like that. And they did not get along with my mom, and my mother did not get along with them. So I think that was part of the problem. So she was not happy living in her own home. And I think the depression kind of peaked, and she just said, this is the way it's going to be. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So with her kids being there, I think I have a chapter in the book called "A Silent Scream," and I think it was a cry for help.
Yeah.
And so we came back and brought love back into the home, and that made a huge difference.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you decide to write a book. What makes you decide to write a book?
Well, while I was doing this, I always, again, I like to record family history. So I've done a lot of things over the years. I created these things we call memory books for each family member that hit a certain monumental birthday. Like when my dad turned 75, I didn't know what to get him. He was a very difficult guy to buy for because he had shoes older than me and pants older than me. So it was tough. So I said, I'm going to give him 75 memories. And then I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And then it just started chronologically, and I had to edit at the end.
Wow.
And the impact on him was just super. So
Yeah.
the next, I did one for my mom. And then after that, I asked people to contribute to the different memories, because some of my siblings, well, I had plenty for my siblings, but I started doing for my aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews. And so I invited their friends and other relatives. So they became these big, pretty elaborate and unique design projects. And then we had family reunions as we all got older, and when nieces and nephews started coming up and stuff. We had these family reunions for 1 week somewhere back east, and sometimes it was like 22 of us. So then I would write a poem at the end of the week summarizing the highlights of that. And then I took my dad to Italy in 1995, to the little village where his father came from, that nobody had been back to in 100 years.
Yeah.
From the Porro family. And I did shot a documentary of that because I didn't want anybody to miss what we discovered over there. And it was just very, very cool. In this village, it was at the time 200 people. It's even less now. And they knew of my great grandfather, who was the mayor of that village back in around 1890. Wow. And they had that whole history. So we opened up all kinds of family history, and it was just very cool. So that became a documentary. So I always recorded stuff. So with my dad, I only had 8 days with my dad, but I took extensive notes, and that'll be also a book. But with my mom, the journey was about 3.5 years. So I took a lot of notes. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, what form it would take, but I took notes and photographs and videos. And then while I was going through this, being a baby boomer, a lot of our people our age and stuff are going to either face this, they have faced it, or they certainly will face it sometime in the future. Yeah. And I had a couple friends who were going through it. And I felt really confident doing what I was doing, especially from what I learned from hospice. And I started giving them some tips. And they got some benefit from it. So I said, I think I got an audience here. And I don't call it a how-to book. It's a what I did book, and it will certainly entertain people, but also may give them some good tips, because with my mom, I kind of treated her with I guess a kind of a romantic touch. I had a really good relationship with both of my folks, and with my mom, I didn't think she was being treated well. She had old lady clothing that I didn't like. So the first thing I did is bought her a new wardrobe. So we're going to get some things, we're going to cheer her up, and nothing cheers up a nice lady with some new clothing, right, which was fun. But there's definitely a market need for this stuff, because I went out shopping. I couldn't find any decent clothing for seniors. So I finally went online and eliminated the senior thing and bought some nice stuff for her that fit, and she liked it, and they're good colors for her complexion and things like that. And then I created a thing I called Day of Beauty. My mom, she worked full time with the kids, so you didn't think she had a lot of time to take care of herself, but she had beautiful nails. She was a hand model back in her late 20s and late teens and early 20s. And so she treated herself to a weekly visit to the beauty salon, where she got a shampoo and set and had her nails done. And so I said, I don't know when the last time she had that done, but I created a thing I called Day of Beauty, where she normally got 2 sponge baths, morning and night. And then for Day of Beauty, I soaked her feet in Epsom salts. I gave her a full body massage, shampooed her hair and put it either in a ponytail or braided it. She got to put on her new wardrobe, and we did her nails with nice bright red nail polish. And then I gave her bright red lipstick to match. Wow. And I didn't think there's much of it, other than I wanted to treat my mom special. Right. And the first time I did it, she couldn't walk anymore after this, though I did get her up about a year later and walking each day a little bit. But I put her in a wheelchair. In between the bedroom and the kitchen for breakfast, we had a big mirror in the dining room. And the first Day of Beauty, I parked her in front of that and leaned in and whispered, "Who is that pretty girl?" and her face was, she just beamed.
Mm.
And I just, oh my gosh, when's the last time this person, especially your mom, felt pretty?
Yeah.
And when's the last time she even looked in a mirror
Yeah.
and liked what she saw?
Right.
And so this wanting to feel pretty and I'm sure handsome for men does not go away. And at this point, she was 90. And so every morning, no matter what, I brought her in front of that mirror and she said, "Who's that pretty girl?" And it was a special treat, especially for me, but also the reaction from her was contagious, because everybody around her could see that she was very happy being treated this way. Sometimes she took it a little far, which I called her, I said, "You're not the queen, by the way." But it was great. And those, as I'm doing these various interviews and spreading the word about the book, people are telling me that nursing homes and assisted living places are starting to feature beauticians coming in, whether it's once a week or once a month, and the effect on the patients is just amazing.
That's
so
awesome.
Those little gestures can make a huge difference.
So talk about the title of the book.
Okay,
don't see a title like that every day.
No, and I'm glad. Yeah, it's a I guess ear and eye catcher. So it's called A Cup of Tea on the Commode, and so Mom couldn't walk anymore, and trying to get her in and out of her old bathroom could have done maybe some more harm. It was just awkward, and the doorways of those old houses is pretty narrow, so you couldn't get the walker through, let alone a wheelchair. So we set up a commode bedside. And sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable for either one of us on the commode. So her favorite beverage was a hot cup of tea with skim milk, no sugar. And one morning while we were waiting, I asked her if she'd like a cup of tea. And she said, sure. And he gave it to her, and it was a big hit. So that became our morning ritual, cup of tea on the commode.
Wow.
So practical, but also catchy.
Yeah, absolutely. I read the title, and I'm like, wait a minute, really? I love it, man. That's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah, so she was, I called the subtitle for the book is My Multitasking Adventures of Caring for Mom and How I Survived to Tell the Tale. But she also was a multitasker. So
how long did she live?
She was drinking and I guess peeing at the same time. So what goes in comes out and things like that. So
how long did she live after the pumpkin pie thing?
3.5 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty. I mean, it's the right thing to do. Taking care of your parents. How long did they take care of us? And I grew up in this kind of family where this was not a big deal, and she deserved better. And so deciding to move back and do this was not hard. Working out the logistics was a little more, I guess, complicated, but because I had a business at the time, the acting business was slowing down, and but I had a snack food business that, again, there's another family legacy. My dad invented this half pop popcorn snack in 1963, and it was like a family secret for a while. And then as the kids, the nieces and nephews started popping out, they would hear the story of Nutrinuts and what Grandpa Poe created, but my dad wasn't making them anymore. So I asked him for the recipe. I used to assist him when I was a little kid. And so I asked him for the recipe. And so I made it out in Los Angeles and almost burned my apartment down the first time I made it. But the stuff came out great. They're like these little crunchy golden nuggets. And he invented this snack because at that time, in the early 60s, McDonald's was coming up and this other junk food. And he wanted to, well, there's two reasons, I think, keep us away from junk food. And also, I think he was fearing impending dental bills. So he wanted to keep us away from candy. So he invented this stuff that he called Nutrinuts, and we then renamed it Grandpa Poe's Originals because I wanted his name to be attached to it. And it became a national brand. Unfortunately, I was working on it. He passed about a year before we were actually in the marketplace. But we were the snack of the day on Rachel Ray, and from that we got national distribution. And for a while that was pretty good. But you're going up against the big boys.
Yeah.
So it was. We had some tough times. But I built a factory in L.A., and I was able to go back every few months. I called it Hell Week, and I cranked out a ton to handle my all the current stores that we had that would hold us off for a couple of months. And while I did that, I had a sister that flew in and cared for mom during that week. So we always had one of the kids on hand to take care of mom. So,
gotcha. So it was called Nutrinuts?
It was called Nutrinuts. That's what my dad called it, but that was added some confusion in the marketplace because there were no nuts. It was popcorn, and he knew how good soybeans were at the time. And this was, we were in the market in 1998. So right when the soy craze was going on, my dad was making this stuff in 63 with soy because he knew it had a good protein and he liked the taste of soybeans. So we caught that wave. We went organic. And then with the soy craze, so we became I guess a big deal for a while because we were organic and we had the soy in there. So
was it
it was an
sweet?
easy sell at the time.
Was it sweet?
Oh, we did have an organic honey coated one. No, it tastes. You know what? It doesn't really taste like popcorn. If you go to the website, there's a page called bonus material where I have, because some of the things I talk about in the book, I have photographs and I've got that documentary of the Italy trip and things like that. And some of these memory books, PDFs of those in there. You'll see the Grandpa Post stuff. They were little golden crunchy nuggets and they were great. And I guess they tasted somewhat like corn, but it was just a unique product and really cool. Now there's a few copycats out there. But we had the original version my dad called slightly unsalted, which was also, I think he liked to do a play on words. So it wasn't heavily salted, it wasn't unsalted, it was slightly unsalted, so a little salt. And then I came up with a spicy version that my brother had a herb company at the time, so he worked out a unique spicy version. And then we did a honey coated version also. So we had the sweet version as well, but the slightly unsalted was the main one and also the bestseller.
Wow. So you were it sounds like earlier in our episode, you mentioned that you were going to write a book about your dad.
Yeah, that's the next one that's in the works.
There
was a lot of stories in this book about our childhood and what I did is I wrote the structure was the most difficult part of this book. I had the whole story chronologically, but I wanted to add flashbacks of things that supported my current actions in this journey and how I was brought up and why when I watched my mother take care of animals, I got that nurturing bug in me. And an older brother also was a big animal lover and things like that. And that helped us take care of not only animals, but each other and stuff like that. So, but there were a few stories that seemed a little more appropriate for another book.
Gotcha.
I think before, the last draft I did, I cut out like probably about 4,000 words. And so those were the start of the next book. Yeah. So
when's that coming out?
Well, it's I'm spending so much time marketing this one. I don't know. I did a little work on it today, but it's funny because I had a number of books I wanted to write.
Yeah.
And then I have this story of my dad. It was originally going to be based on the 8 days I had with him.
Right.
Before he passed. But also the Nutrinuts was a big part of our lives, and especially what we did after he passed. And then this Italy trip. So those could all be separate books, but I think I can weave them all together.
Yeah.
Because when we went to this little village in Italy, all three factors came into play because it was just me and my dad, and I brought the snack food with me to introduce it to the village where his father came from. And so all three stories come together. So I have the ending of the book So yeah, it'll be good, but boy, they're hard to write.
Yeah.
I had to wait a number of years for this book with my mom because I needed separation because I still cried during certain parts. Doing the audio book was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
All my acting training had to pop in because somebody asked me to read something a couple of weeks ago, and I broke down. And it's like my mom passed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's
your mom.
Yeah, it's mom.
Yeah.
So same with my dad as well. So it's they're good stories, but a lot of fun too. A lot of people say they laugh out loud. So I say you get to cry out loud, you'll laugh out loud, and maybe you'll get some tips to jump in and take care of your loved ones.
Mark Steven Porro, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. It was great to meet you, bud. You've got an amazing story.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to do that. And whenever I can share a story of my mom, it kind of keeps her in the present, which is a gift to me. So I thank you for that.
Love that, buddy. Take care.
Okay, you too.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.